So in the first episode, it introduces June, Luke, and their daughter Hannah. So they are speeding away from what sounds like sirens. Luke hits a corner and the car goes into a ditch. Luke basically tells June, his wife, to take their daughter and to run into the woods. And later on in the season, you will start to understand the importance of the woods and just certain political areas that aren't yet, they call it no man's land. June runs in the woods with her daughter, and Luke stays behind as the sirens get closer. So while June is running with Hannah in the woods, she hears a gunshot and she assumes that they killed Luke, which is they as in Gilead soldiers. So June and Hannah hide. The soldiers do find them. They knock June out, rip Hannah from her arms, and puts Hannah in another vehicle. And they put June on a gurney and they put her in a black van. Next scene comes up, and basically June is upstairs in a new home. The series doesn't talk about where she was before, and she spends time describing her environment. There are no TVs, no books, no music. Women cannot talk to one another. Only Marthas and handmaids go to the supermarket, and wives are known to take care of the children or garden. June is upstairs waiting to be introduced to the Waterfords. Mrs. Waterford is like, I don't, usually do this, but you can sit down. So automatically, Mrs. Waterford is definitely asserting herself as someone who is ranked higher than a handmaid. They're waiting for Mr. Waterford to come in. Mr. Waterford comes in, and automatically you can tell that Mr. Waterford strays. He has a strayful eye. His energy, his presence, you can just tell that he really and truly does run the entire household, and he doesn't do a lot of talking. June says some very routine sentences. You will hear that a lot on The Handmaid's Tale. They are not permitted to talk to one another. So women can't talk to other women, and men are not supposed to even talk to other women. It gets to be a little confusing. So the women cannot talk to each other. The men can talk to each other, but her only role, the wife, is to raise the children. Mr. Waterford has to go, and he says, nice to meet you, and she says, you too. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal to anyone else because that's just like the polite thing to do. But in this instance, it made Mrs. Waterford look at her, and basically she let her know in so many words, if you give me trouble, I'm gonna give you trouble. And she did compare the last handmaid to a animal, like an untrained dog. So she automatically, Mrs. Waterford is showing very little regard and care for handmaids in their role. But you will learn later on in the series that Mrs. Waterford, like a lot of wives in Gilead, Mrs. Waterford at least wants a kid. She does want a child. So that would be the only reason that you would, and later on you'll see that that's the only thing that motivates her to show any ounce of compassion, and it taps into her soft side. She, like a lot of people in Gilead, are deeply affected by the laws and the control and the watching of each other. That the walking partner is like pious. The walking partner does what everybody does, which is routine sentences because they're not supposed to talk to one another. So she is, I guess, kind of frustrated that this handmaid, her walking partner, because they go everywhere in twos, that this walking partner is following the rules, and thus encouraging her to conform, right? So she thinks. So in the supermarket, I noticed that there isn't a big, huge supply of groceries. It's just the right amount, and everything is in like clear glass bottles or jars. And the only thing that I saw with a symbol was the milk, and it was the Gilead symbol, and it had like red, blue, which stood for the grades of milk. There's no brands, there's no restaurants, there's no fast food, there's none of that. The only place you eat is at home. And basically, if you are not a commander, a wife, or a child, you are either training to be a wife, you're a Martha, they automatically put you in a domestic roles. It's very complex because Gilead does have files on everyone, so their occupation, and so everyone is meticulously picked and placed in certain roles based on their standards and their laws. June is spacing out definitely in the supermarket. She does this a lot to note. She has flashbacks of her daughter, and I think also she just notices that time is going by and she doesn't know where her daughter is. So this was like the first instance that June actually mentioned violence, wanting to scream and grab the nearest machine gun. So you could definitely tell being in a controlled, oppressive environment is not good on the psyche. I believe it breeds violence. After they leave the supermarket, June and her walking partner do see people hanging off of buildings. This is done as a intimidation, traumatizing tactic. It's meant to control people and scare people and to remind people